Okay, Ariados just won the first global challenge in Pokemon Champions, and I think most people, myself included, had the same reaction of what? Ariados? This Pokemon with almost no usage, underwhelming stats, and is definitely not the kind of thing you expect to see on a tournament winning team, won. But that's why I think this is so interesting. Ariados did not win because it suddenly became broken. It won because it filled out a very specific role on a team that was already really strong. And that's what I want to break down today. Why Ariados wasn't just like a meme, but also why it probably won't be something that you can throw onto just every team. Before we even talk about Ariados though, we need to talk about the actual team around it. So this team was not just some 6 random off-meta Pokemon. It had some of the strongest Pokemon in the entire format. Mega Aerodactyl, Garchomp, Sylveon, Mega Charizard Y, and Basculegion. So Ariados was not being asked to carry the team, and I think that's really important to understand. It was just the 6th slot that was there to kind of round out and patch some matchups that they had a hard time dealing with themselves. So this is the first lesson in this presentation is good anti-meta picks usually work because they support a strong core, not because they replace the strong core. So first, let's talk about Sylveon. One of the biggest pieces here is Sylveon with this combo. Sylveon was one of the main stars of the team because it hits extremely hard. And unlike Mega Floette, it doesn't take up your Mega slot. So this means pairing it with something like Charizard Y or Mega Aerodactyl is a lot more viable. But Sylveon has its problems. It's not a very physically bulky Pokemon, and it doesn't have a great speed stat. It can be kind of awkward. So the question becomes is how do we give Sylveon safe turns? And that's where Ariados starts to make sense in this 6. Because Ariados gives Sylveon protection, speed control, and matchup support against things that would normally pressure it really strong. If I had to explain Ariados' role in one sentence, it would be Ariados exists to buy turns for stronger Pokemon. It had a Rage Powder to redirect attacks away from Sylveon or other partners. It had String Shot to drop both of your opponent's Pokemon speed. That's the really nice thing about String Shot is that it can hit both of your opponent's Pokemon and lower their speed by 2. And that's really valuable with this team, which wants its heavy hitters to be moving first. It also had Insomnia, which means it can't fall asleep. So if you ever run into the off-meta Vivillon or you run into Venusaur, or even if you get hit by Dire Claw, like you won't be able to go to sleep. So that's really valuable because you don't have to worry about those sleep rolls. And it also had Knockoff, which ended up being a huge surprise tool, especially into Basculegion. Ariados was not there to sweep. It was only there to create one turn that lets Sylveon or Charizard or Garchomp take over. It just wanted to make one opening for these Pokemon. Sneasler becomes really awkward into Ariados. It makes sense into the Sneasler matchup, especially. So Sneasler is terrifying because it can pressure you with physical damage, fake out style disruption, Dire Claw, status nonsense. But Ariados is actually really annoying for Sneasler to deal with. Because of the typing, poison, and bug, and the bulk investment, Sneasler does very little damage to it. It resists both of its stab attacks. And because Ariados has Insomnia, Sneasler can't randomly steal the game either with the sleep roll from Dire Claw. So when Ariados is next to Sylveon, Sneasler plays in an awkward spot. If they attack, Ariados can redirect it. If they stay in, they might just waste turns. And if Ariados gets a String Shot off, suddenly Sylveon can start outspeeding things it normally would not be able to. And this is not Ariados being overpowered. This is like what I'm talking about, where this is a very specific answer to a very specific problem. The other matchup that makes this pick interesting is Into the Rain matchup. Watching other people's videos about this and kind of seeing what everyone had to say about it, In Cybertron's video specifically, he mentioned that Federico had trouble with rain style leads, especially with stuff like Sableye plus Choice Scarf Basculegion. And this combination could pressure the team really hard with Rain Dance and adaptability boosted wave crashes. Nothing on this team wants to take that. And this is a really tricky line that Federico would use Ariados for. He would lead Ariados and Sylveon, and on turn 1, he would protect the Sylveon, and they would almost always wave crash into the Sylveon. And then Ariados would go for knockoff into Basculegion, and kind of just clearing that threat from the team immediately. And if the opponent targets Sylveon, you're blocking that damage, knockoff is punishing Basculegion, and then on the next turn, Ariados can just start rage powdering while Sylveon fires off hyper voices. So this was a good example of why it worked. It wasn't just sitting there to click Rage Powder every game. It had a surprise line, a surprise move to punish the opponents that had a certain idea of how they expected the matchup to go. And that's a really big deal. This is another example of Ariados being used for very specific purposes. String Shot was also a big deal for this team. It's one of the coolest things about this set, I think, is a lot of people look at Ariados and if they know anything about it in the first place, they think Rage Powder. But String Shot had major value on this team. It gave you more speed control. I think really good Pokemon teams have 2 or 3 ways to control the speed. And a lot of people probably didn't see String Shot coming. It drops the speed of both your opponent's Pokemon by 2 stages, which is huge in any format because speed is king. And it's especially useful because if it's not Trick Room, it lets Pokemon like Sylveon, Pokesash, Basculegion suddenly outspeed all the things they wouldn't be able to. And that's a status that would stay on the field as long as those Pokemon are on the field. It won't just wear off like Tailwind or Trick Room. That is how fast that Pokemon is going to be until it resets its speed with a swap, which is huge value. This changes the end games. If Ariados gets 1 String Shot off, the opponent may not be able to switch out easily, and now you're slower forever, and your damage dealers can just clean up the end game. So it wasn't just a redirector, it was also a weird speed control support Pokemon. It was bringing so much value to this team specifically. Another thing that surprised me is Ariados with its bulk could actually be a lot harder to get rid of than expected. On paper, its stats are very unimpressive, but with the right bulky spread, the Citrus Berry, its typing, it can survive a lot of relevant attacks from some meta Pokemon. Takes very little from Sneasler, like we talked about before. It can take fairy attacks from Mega Floette better than you might expect because of its poison typing, and some physical hits do not always remove it immediately. And obviously, to be clear, this doesn't mean that Ariados is for some reason invincible. It has its horrible matchups. It does not want to be taking fire type attacks. It does not want to be taking flying type attacks. Charizard and Pelipper will just clean this thing up in 1 hit. But the point is, your opponents probably looked at Ariados and thought, I can just remove that with 1 hit. Just a neutral hit, doesn't really matter. And a lot of the time it's not actually true, and they'll stay on the field and you get 2 Rage Powders off, or a String Shot, or you get a knockoff. It can take opponents by surprise when it stays on the field for 2 or 3 turns. And so this is probably the most important part. Surprise was a huge part of the value. Federico was using Ariados before anyone really knew what it did, and this tournament was in a closed team sheet best of 1 format, so nobody could see what moves it had or what item it had, and that's really huge for anti-meta Pokemon. The anti-meta Pokemon usually peak before everyone can understand what it's doing. People might have expected Rage Powder, but they weren't prepared for knockoff. People might have been prepared for Rage Powder, but weren't ready for String Shot. But now that everyone's going to know about Ariados, the surprise factor of it is going to be much less valuable, and you probably won't get the same mileage out of it that Federico did. And so is Ariados going to be meta now? And the quick answer is no, it won't be meta now. It's not going to become the next Sneasler or King Gambit. It's not going to be something you can slap on every team. But what I do think it could be is a niche support Pokemon, something that patches matchups of a very specific kind. That's exactly why it worked. So the real lesson here is not everybody should use Ariados. You don't want to just copy the winning teams. You want to understand why these weird choices are there. Ariados made sense because the team already had so many strong damage dealers. It made sense because Sylveon needed support, specifically with Sneasler, and the Sneasler and Rain leads. It made sense because Ariados had a unique combination of Rage Powder, String Shot, Insomnia knockoff, and that's like what anti-meta really means. It's not using a bad Pokemon just to be different. It's finding a Pokemon that solves a problem other people are not preparing for. But the reasoning was there. It's really interesting to see why he picked Ariados. And so creativity still matters. Overall, I think Ariados winning is awesome. Not because Ariados is like top tier secretly, but because it shows, creativity in team building is still a big thing. You could have a Pokemon with low usage, bad stats, literally zero hype, and it can still be the perfect sixth slot if it solves the right problems. And that's what made this team so cool. Because if you look at this team, you just see literally the most vanilla 5 meta Pokemon that there is, and then a really cool 6th pick. And that 6th pick wasn't there just for hype, just for street cred. It was literally there to solve a problem that no other supporting Pokemon could. And I think that's really, really cool when we see that in team building. So now I want to hear from you guys. What do you guys think are some Pokemon that people are sleeping on right now? Is it another weird support pick that could have an Ariados moment, or is it just something that's solving a meta problem? Not like the meta as a whole, but like, hey, if your team's struggling with this, try this Pokemon. Because I think that's when team building becomes really, really cool. So anyways, let me know in the comments if you guys like these anti-meta breakdowns, if you want me to do more of them. I just thought it was so cool to see Ariados in there, and I wanted to break down maybe why this Pokemon was chosen for, so that you guys can kind of understand where the choice to use that came from, and how maybe you can use the similar reasoning to find success and value on your team with other unused little gem of a Pokemon that no one else is seeing but you. So thank you for watching the video, guys. I appreciate it. And everyone, have a great rest of your day. I'll see you in the next one.